He got his maid pregnant, then accused her of theft and threw her out with nothing. As she walked away in tears, she whispered, "One day my son will return for revenge." But fate had its own plan. She gave birth to a daughter. 20 years later, that daughter stepped into the karate ring, fire in her eyes, determination in her stance. Her opponent? The same millionaire who had destroyed her mother's life. What he didn't know was that she was his blood. And he wasn't just rich, he was a black belt too. But when their eyes locked and the match began, nothing could prepare him for the final blow. When the truth hit harder than her fist. Hi, my beautiful family. May the one who knows your silent battles and unseen tears bless you with peace beyond understanding. May your days be filled with kindness, your nights with calm, and your heart with joy that never fades. Amen. To everyone who's just joined us, you're not a stranger here. You've walked into a circle of love, a place where stories heal, connect, and remind us of who we are. Stay with us till the end, because your presence matters. Let this story become your safe place. Let's take attendance together now. Comment present if you're sitting with your brother, Mr. Peter, and if my stories ever made you cry, smile, or feel seen, comment, "Yes, I'm with my brother, Mr. Peter." And if you love being here, don't forget to like. The safe clicked open with the sound of 20 years of buried secrets finally breaking free. Teora Delacroix knelt before the hidden compartment she'd discovered behind her grandmother's portrait, her hands trembling as she reached inside. The funeral had been 3 days ago, and she was supposed to be packing up the Brooklyn apartment, not uncovering family mysteries. But when she'd moved the heavy portrait to wrap it in bubble paper, the loose brick behind it had shifted, revealing a metal box built into the wall. Inside the safe lay documents that made her breath catch. Legal papers, photographs, and a leather-bound diary with her mother's maiden name inscribed on the cover. Sabria Reeves. 20-year-old Teora had never heard that name before. Her mother had always been Sabria Delacroix for as long as she could remember. With shaking fingers, she opened the diary to the first entry, dated 21 years ago. Today, I started working at the Hartmore estate. Mr. Silas Hartmore is younger than I expected, only 28 and so handsome it takes my breath away. The house is like a palace, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings that probably cost more than most people make in a lifetime. I can't believe I'm the head housekeeper at only 22. Maybe my life is finally changing for the better. The other staff seem nice enough, though they warned me that Mr. Hartmore is demanding and doesn't tolerate mistakes. I'm determined to prove myself worthy of this opportunity. Teora's heart hammered against her ribs. Hartmore. She knew that name, Silas Hartmore, the billionaire CEO who was always on the business news, the one they called the warrior CEO for his aggressive business tactics and his recent hobby of boxing other executives for charity. But why was her mother writing about him like this? She flipped through pages, watching her mother's handwriting chronicle a growing relationship. He asked me to stay late, to help with preparations for his business dinner. 20 of Manhattan's most powerful people, and he trusted me to coordinate everything. When our hands touched over the wine glasses, I felt electricity shoot through my entire body. He felt it too. I could see it in his eyes, the way they widened and then darkened. This is dangerous territory, but I've never felt anything like this before. He's not like the other wealthy men I've worked for. There's something genuine underneath all that power. We talked for hours tonight after the staff left. He told me about his childhood, how his father was cold and distant, how he built his business empire to prove himself worthy of love that never came. When he looks at me, I feel like I'm the only woman in the world. He kissed me by the library fireplace, gentle and sweet, like I might break if he wasn't careful. I know I should stop this before it goes further, but I'm falling in love with him. Actually, if I'm being honest, I think I already have. Teora's hands were shaking now. Her mother and Silas Hartmore? It seemed impossible. I told him about my dreams tonight, opening my own catering business, having a family, buying a little house with a garden where children could play safely. He listened like my words were the most important thing he'd ever heard. He said he'd help me achieve everything, that together we could build something beautiful. When he holds me in his arms by the fireplace, when he whispers that he loves me, I believe we could have a future together, despite everything that separates us. The other staff don't know about us yet, but I can see some of them are getting suspicious. We have to be so careful, but these stolen moments are worth any risk. The entries became more intimate, documenting secret meetings in his private study, stolen kisses in empty hallways, and a love that seemed genuine on both sides. Teora could feel her mother's joy radiating from every word, the happiness of a young woman who believed she'd found her soulmate. Then came the entry that made Teora's world tilt completely off its axis. I'm pregnant. I told Silas tonight after dinner when we were alone in his study. At first he was shocked. I could see the fear in his eyes, the rapid calculations of what this would mean for his reputation, his business, his carefully constructed public image. But then he held me and said, we'd figure it out together. He said he loved me more than his reputation, more than his money, more than anything. That we'd make it work somehow, no matter what obstacles we faced. I've never been so scared and so happy at the same time. Our baby will be born into love, even if the circumstances are complicated. Pregnant. Teora did quick math in her head. The timeline matched her birth perfectly. Her hands flew to the next entry, dated a week later. Everything has changed. The board of directors found out about us somehow. Silas came to my room tonight, but he was different, cold, distant. He offered me money to take care of the problem. When I said I wouldn't have an abortion, his face went hard. He said I was being selfish, that I'd destroy his career. This isn't the man I fell in love with. Teora's stomach churned as she read on. He's given me an ultimatum. Take the money and disappear, or face the consequences. I told him I'd raise our child alone before I'd murder it for his convenience. He said I'd regret that decision. I'm scared, but I won't back down. Our baby deserves to live. The next entry was written in shaky handwriting. They came for me this morning. Police officers with a search warrant. They found expensive jewelry hidden in my personal belongings, pieces I've never seen before. Silas stood watching from his office window as they arrested me in front of all the staff. The humiliation was unbearable. His lawyer had it all planned perfectly. Tears blurred Teora's vision as she read her mother's account of the nightmare. 48 hours in jail before the charges were dropped. Not enough evidence for formal charges, but the damage was done. The arrest made all the newspapers. Maid seduces employer, steals jewelry. My reputation is destroyed. No one will hire me now. I'm 4 months pregnant, homeless, and branded a thief. Silas got what he wanted. I've disappeared from his world completely. The final entry was brief. I've changed my name to Delacroix, grandmother's maiden name. I'm moving to Brooklyn where no one knows me. I'll clean offices at night, stay invisible. If our daughter ever asks about her father, I'll tell her he was a good man who died young. She'll never know the truth about Silas Hartmore unless she's strong enough to seek justice someday. Maybe when she turns 25. Maybe never. Some secrets are too dangerous to tell. Teora slammed the diary shut, her entire body shaking with rage. Silas Hartmore wasn't just some random billionaire. He was her father. The father who had destroyed her mother's life, branded her a thief, and abandoned his own child. She picked up one of the photographs from the safe. It showed her mother at 22, radiantly beautiful and glowing with happiness, standing next to a younger Silas Hartmore. They looked genuinely in love, which somehow made the betrayal even worse. Teora, her mother's voice called from the front door. I brought Chinese food. Teora quickly shoved everything back into the safe and pushed the loose brick back into place. She wasn't ready to confront her mother, not yet. She needed time to process this revelation, to decide what to do with this information. "Coming, Mama," she called back, hanging the portrait back over the hidden compartment. Sabria appeared in the doorway, carrying take-out bags and looking exhausted from her double shift at the diner. At 42, she was still beautiful, but Teora could see the weight of years spent looking over her shoulder, the premature lines around her eyes from 20 years of fear and struggle. "You look pale, baby," Sabria said, setting down the food and touching Teora's forehead. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just tired," Teora lied, letting her mother fuss over her. "It's been a long day." As they ate dinner together, Teora studied her mother with new eyes. Every worried glance, every careful moment of silence, every time Sabria changed the channel when business news came on, it all made sense now. Her mother had been protecting her from the truth about Silas Hartmore, but Teora was 20 years old, not a child anymore. And the man who had destroyed her mother's life was out there, living in luxury, probably having forgotten Sabria Reeves ever existed. "Mama," Teora said carefully, "what would you do if someone had hurt our family, but they were too powerful for regular justice?" Sabria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That's a strange question, baby. Why do you ask?" "Just thinking about unfairness in the world, I guess." Her mother set down her fork and looked directly at her. "Some people have too much power to touch. Sometimes the best justice is living a good life despite them. Sometimes staying safe is more important than being right." After dinner, Teora lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, but they weren't enough. Living quietly while Silas Hartmore continued his successful life wasn't justice. It was surrender. She grabbed her laptop and searched for recent news about Silas Hartmore. What she found made her blood boil. He was now famous for executive boxing, a trendy sport where business leaders settled disputes in the ring for charity. He was undefeated, arrogant, and used his warrior CEO persona to cover up his company's environmental crimes and worker exploitation. The most recent article showed him at a gala, surrounded by admirers, bragging about his undefeated record. The headline read, "Warrior CEO Silas Hartmore, the man who has everything." Everything except the daughter he'd tried to erase from existence. Teora closed the laptop and made a decision that would change her life forever. Her mother had spent 20 years hiding from Silas Hartmore, but Teora wasn't going to hide. She was going to make him pay for what he'd done to her family. And she was going to do it in the one place where his money and power couldn't protect him, in the ring, where victory was earned with blood, sweat, and skill. The next morning she would start training to become the fighter who would finally give Silas Hartmore the justice he deserved. Chapter 2. Westbrook Elite Boxing Academy. The heavy bag exploded under Teora's fist, like her rage had finally found its target, the satisfying thud echoing through the pristine training facility like a gunshot. 2 weeks after discovering the diary, she stood in the state-of-the-art training facility of Westbrook Elite Boxing Academy, her knuckles raw and bleeding, her heart hammering with newfound purpose. The upscale gym was nothing like the basement workout rooms she'd imagined. This was where real fighters trained, where Olympic champions had been forged. Professional equipment gleamed under bright lights. 3 regulation-size rings dominated the main floor, and walls lined with championship photographs told stories of victories that had made careers and changed lives. The smell of leather, sweat, and determination filled the air. Serious athletes moved through their routines with focused intensity, some shadowboxing in front of mirrors, others working heavy bags with mechanical precision, a few sparring in the rings under the watchful eyes of experienced trainers. This wasn't a casual fitness gym. This was a temple dedicated to the art and science of fighting. "Easy there, Tiger," called a voice behind her that carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had commanded respect in the ring and beyond. You're going to hurt yourself before you learn how to hurt anyone else." Teora spun around to face a silver-haired woman in her 60s, compact and muscular despite her age, with intelligent grey eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail about a person in seconds. Her movements were economical and precise, the bearing of someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of controlled violence. This had to be Amelia Westbrook, the legendary former Olympic boxing coach whose academy was famous throughout New York's fighting circles. Amelia's reputation preceded her. She'd trained 3 Olympic medalists, 2 world champions, and dozens of professional fighters who spoke her name with reverence. More importantly for Teora's purposes, she was known for taking on unconventional students, particularly women who were serious about learning the sport in a world still dominated by men. "I want to learn to box," Teora said, trying to keep the desperation from bleeding into her voice, but knowing she was failing miserably. Amelia circled her slowly, studying her like a piece of sculpture she was considering for purchase. Her assessment was thorough and professional, examining Teora's stance, her natural balance, the way she held her hands, even the calluses that were beginning to form from weeks of hitting bags incorrectly. "Honey, wanting and doing are 2 entirely different animals," Amelia said after completing her evaluation. "You've got natural athleticism. I can see that in the way you move, the length of your reach, your center of gravity, good muscle tone, decent reflexes, and more fire in your belly than a dragon with indigestion. But boxing isn't about throwing wild punches at a leather bag until your knuckles bleed. That's just a good way to break your hands and accomplish nothing." "Then teach me what it is about." "Why?" Amelia's question was sharp, direct. "What's driving you? And don't give me some generic answer about fitness or self-defense. I can smell desperation on you from across the room." Teora hesitated. She couldn't tell this stranger about Silas Hartmore, about the diary, about her mother's destroyed life. "Not yet. Someone hurt my family. I want to make sure they can't hurt us again." Amelia's expression softened slightly. "Fair enough, but let me tell you what you're really asking for. Professional boxing training takes years. To get good enough to compete seriously, minimum 2 years of intensive work. To beat someone with real experience, someone who's been training for decades, you're looking at 3 years, maybe more. It's going to hurt every single day. You'll bleed, you'll cry, you'll want to quit 1,000 times." "I won't quit. Everyone says that on day 1, Amelia replied. "We'll see if you're saying it on day 500. She quoted Teora the monthly training fee, and Teora's heart sank. It was more than she made in 2 months at the diner where she worked part-time. "I'll find the money," Teora said firmly. "I'll work extra shifts. I'll do whatever it takes." Amelia studied her for another long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll start with basics. Footwork, breathing, proper form. Don't expect to throw a real punch for weeks." The next 10 months passed in a blur of exhaustion and determination. Teora worked double shifts at the diner, surviving on rice and beans to pay for training. Every spare moment was spent at the academy, learning the fundamentals that would become second nature. Footwork drills until her legs screamed, breathing exercises that made her dizzy, form work that seemed impossibly precise. But slowly, she began to understand what Amelia meant about boxing being more than throwing punches. It was chess played with violence, strategy executed with split-second timing, art painted with pain. "Better," Amelia said one evening, watching Teora work through combinations on the heavy bag. "Your left hook is getting dangerous, but you're still holding back something. There's power in you that you're not accessing." Teora wiped sweat from her forehead. "What do you mean?" "You're technically sound now, but there's no killer instinct. You fight like you're afraid of hurting someone. In the ring, that hesitation will get you destroyed." That night, Teora went home to her small apartment and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her body had transformed over the months of training. lean muscle definition in her arms and shoulders, her core tight and strong. But Amelia was right about her holding back. Even in training, she couldn't access the full depth of her rage. The next morning, she made a decision that would change everything. "I need to see those documents again," she told her reflection. She returned to her grandmother's old apartment, now empty and ready for sale. Behind the portrait, the safe waited like a patient secret. This time, she read every page of the diary, studied every photograph, absorbed every detail of her mother's pain. When she arrived at the academy that afternoon, something fundamental had shifted. Amelia noticed immediately. "There it is," she said, watching Teora attack the heavy bag with newfound ferocity. "Now, you're fighting like your life depends on it." The bag shuddered under combinations that had real violence behind them. Teora's breathing was controlled, her form perfect, but there was something primal in her movement now. "I think you're ready for the next level," Amelia said after the session. "I want you to meet someone." The next evening, Amelia introduced her to Caspian Thorne. He walked into the gym like he owned it, but there was nothing arrogant about his presence. At 26, he moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood violence as an art form. His dark hair was slightly too long, his amber eyes patient and intelligent. A thin scar ran along his left temple, and his nose had been broken at least once, but somehow these imperfections only made him more compelling. "Amelia tells me you're serious about this," he said, his voice deeper than she'd expected. "But serious isn't enough. To do what you want to do, you need to be obsessed." "I am," she replied, and meant it. He studied her with those penetrating eyes, and she felt like he could see straight through to her secrets. "We'll see. Let's start with basics." The first training session with Caspian was unlike anything she'd experienced. Where Amelia had been methodical and patient, Caspian was intense and demanding. He pushed her harder than she'd ever been pushed, correcting tiny flaws in her technique, demanding perfection in every movement. "Your footwork is sloppy," he said, moving behind her to adjust her stance. When his hands touched her hips to correct her position, electricity shot through her entire body. "Feel how your weight should be distributed. Like this." His chest pressed against her back as he guided her through the proper movement, and she could smell his cologne mixed with honest sweat. Her pulse quickened, but she tried to focus on the lesson. "Again," he said, stepping back, "and keep your guard up. An opening like that would get you killed." They worked through basic combinations, his hands occasionally touching hers to adjust her form. Each contact sent heat racing through her veins, but she forced herself to concentrate on the training. "You have natural talent," he admitted as they finished the session. "But talent isn't enough. Someone hurt your family. I can see it in your eyes. That anger can be fuel, but only if you learn to control it instead of letting it control you." After he left, Teora sat alone in the gym, still feeling the ghost of his touch on her skin. This was dangerous territory. She couldn't afford to be distracted by attraction when she had a mission to complete. But when she replayed the session in her mind, she couldn't deny the way her body had responded to his presence, his voice, his careful corrections of her form. "Focus," she whispered to herself. "This is about justice, not romance." But as she walked home through the Brooklyn streets, she couldn't stop thinking about Caspian Thorne's amber eyes and the way he'd said her name like it meant something important. Over the following weeks, their training sessions became the highlight of her days. Caspian was a master teacher, patient but demanding, pushing her to levels of skill she hadn't known were possible. And with each session, the attraction between them grew stronger, though neither acknowledged it directly. When he demonstrated defensive positions, standing behind her with his arms around her to show proper blocking technique, she could feel his breath on her neck and had to fight to concentrate on his instructions. When she landed a particularly good combination on the heavy bag, The pride in his eyes made her heart race faster than the physical exertion. "You're getting dangerous," he told her one evening as they finished a particularly intense session. Both of them were breathing hard, covered in sweat, and standing closer than strictly necessary. "Good," she replied, looking up into his eyes. For a moment, the air between them crackled with possibility. Then he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Same time tomorrow," he said, but his voice was rougher than usual. As Tiora walked home that night, she realized her training had become about more than just preparing to face Silas Hartmore. Somewhere in the midst of perfecting her technique and building her strength, she'd started falling for her trainer. And judging by the way Caspian had looked at her tonight, she wasn't the only one feeling the pull of attraction. Chapter 3. Intimate Training Sessions. Sweat dripped between her shoulder blades as Caspian's arms encircled her from behind, his voice a whisper against her ear that made her entire body tremble. "Control your breathing," he murmured, his chest pressed against her back as he demonstrated the submission hold. "Feel how your opponent's weight shifts. Anticipate their next move." 8 months into training with Caspian, and Tiora still couldn't get used to the way her pulse raced whenever he touched her. What had started as professional instruction had evolved into something far more intimate, though neither of them dared acknowledge it directly. They were alone in the private training room after hours, working on advanced grappling techniques. The main gym had closed an hour ago, leaving them in their own world of sweat, struggle, and unspoken desire. "Like this?" she asked, trying to focus on the technique instead of the way his breath felt against her neck. "Exactly. Now, when I tighten my grip, you need to—" His arms contracted around her midsection, and she gasped at the sudden intimacy of being held so completely. "Feel where I'm vulnerable." She could barely think with his body wrapped around hers like this, every nerve ending hyper-aware of his proximity. The scent of his cologne, mixed with honest sweat, filled her nostrils. His forearms, corded with muscle and decorated with small scars from years of training, pressed against her ribs. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her back, strong and sure, and wondered if he could feel how hers had started racing. I need you to show me again," she whispered, her voice coming out breathier than intended, betraying her body's response to his closeness. She felt him hesitate, his grip loosening slightly, as if he too was affected by their proximity. "Tiora, please, I need to get this right." The words carried a double meaning that neither of them could ignore. He repositioned himself behind her, and this time when his arms came around her, she felt him trying to maintain professional distance, even as the technique required intimate contact. But when she shifted to test the grip, her body pressed back against his instinctively, and she heard his sharp intake of breath, felt the way his muscles tensed in response. "The escape is all about leverage," he said, his voice rougher now, strained with the effort of maintaining control. "You use my strength against me, find the weak points in what seems like an unbreakable hold. Like this." He guided her through the movement slowly, their bodies moving together in a way that felt more like dancing than fighting. His hands on her wrists were gentle but firm, showing her exactly where to apply pressure, how to twist her body to break free. When she turned in his arms to face him during the counter-technique practice, they were suddenly eye to eye, breathing hard from the exertion, and something else entirely that neither wanted to name. The space between them hummed with electricity, with possibilities that hung in the air like a challenge neither was brave enough to accept yet. "Better," he said, but neither of them stepped apart. His hands were still on her waist, her palms flat against his chest, and the space between them hummed with electricity. "Caspian," she whispered, and watched his eyes drop to her lips for just a moment before he forced himself to look away. We should work on your footwork," he said, stepping back with obvious effort. These moments had become more frequent over the past few weeks, each training session pushing the boundaries of their unspoken agreement to keep things strictly professional. The boxing training required constant physical contact, him adjusting her stance with hands on her hips, showing her defensive positions that meant his body covering hers protectively, demonstrating counters that left them breathless and tangled together on the mat, hearts racing from more than just physical exertion. Each session made it harder to pretend that the attraction simmering between them wasn't mutual, wasn't growing stronger with every passing day. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his touch lingered a fraction longer than necessary when correcting her form. The way they both found excuses to stay close, to extend their training sessions, to exist in this bubble where the outside world couldn't intrude. "Your left hook has real power now," Caspian observed as she worked the heavy bag with fluid combinations that would have been impossible months earlier, his eyes following the graceful movement of her body with obvious appreciation. "But you're telegraphing it with your shoulder. Your right shoulder drops just before you throw, giving your opponent advance warning." He moved behind her again, this time placing his hands on her shoulders to demonstrate proper form. His thumbs traced the edge of her shoulder blades as he spoke, and she shivered at the gentle contact that sent heat spiraling through her entire nervous system. "Keep your shoulders level throughout the entire combination," he instructed, his hands sliding down to her waist to show her how to generate power from her core instead of just her arms. His fingers spread across her ribs, demonstrating proper muscle engagement. "The power comes from here, from your center, not just your shoulders and arms. Feel that." She felt everything, the warmth of his palms through her tank top, the way his touch made her skin burn with awareness, the flutter of desire low in her belly that had nothing to do with boxing technique and everything to do with the man teaching her. "Yes," she breathed, not trusting herself to say more. "Good, now throw it again, but remember." His voice trailed off as she turned slightly in his hold, bringing them face to face once more. This time the look in his eyes was unmistakably hungry before he caught himself and stepped back. The session ended with both of them wound tight with tension, carefully avoiding eye contact as they cleaned up the equipment. "Same time tomorrow?" Caspian asked as they prepared to leave. "Actually," Teora said, gathering her courage, "I was hoping we could add some evening sessions. I want to train harder, and I learn better when it's just us." The request hung in the air between them, loaded with implications they both understood but couldn't voice. "Evening sessions," he repeated slowly. "Just us. If you don't mind working late, I can pay you extra for the private time." His eyes darkened at her choice of words, and she realized how that sounded. Heat flooded her cheeks, but she didn't take it back. "I don't need extra payment," he said quietly. "If you want to train harder, I'll help you. But Teora, we need to be careful." "Careful of what?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out in his expression. Professional ethics, battling personal desire. "Never mind," he said finally. "Tomorrow night, then. 8 o'clock. The next evening's session was electric with anticipation. They worked through advanced combinations, his hands constantly on her body to correct her form, guide her movements, demonstrate techniques. Every touch lasted a fraction longer than necessary. Every correction brought them closer together. "Defense is about reading your opponent," he explained, moving to stand in front of her. "Watch my eyes, my shoulders, the way I shift my weight. Everything telegraphs intention if you know how to look." She studied his face intently, trying to focus on the lesson. But what she saw in his expression had nothing to do with boxing and everything to do with the want he was trying so hard to hide. "What do you see?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I see." She started, then stopped herself. She couldn't say what she really saw. The way he looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous, the careful control he maintained over his desire, the way his jaw clenched when she got too close. I see someone trying very hard not to cross a line, she finished honestly. His breath caught. Teora. It's okay, she said softly. I'm trying not to cross it too. They stared at each other for a heartbeat, the admission hanging between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Then he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. Let's work on your defensive positioning. But as the weeks continued, that line became harder and harder to respect. The evening sessions grew more intense, both in training and in the unacknowledged attraction that crackled between them. One night, as they worked on close-quarters combat, Teora found herself pinned beneath him on the training mat, his weight holding her down as he demonstrated an escape technique. But instead of immediately showing her the counter, they both went very still. His face was inches from hers, his breathing as ragged as her own. She could see gold flecks in his amber eyes, could smell the clean scent of his skin mixed with honest sweat. The escape, she whispered, not moving. Right, he said, but made no move to demonstrate. Instead, his gaze dropped to her lips, and she saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. For a moment that stretched like eternity, she thought he might kiss her. Wanted him to kiss her with an intensity that shocked her. But then he rolled away, putting distance between them with obvious effort. That's enough for tonight, he said, his voice strained. As she gathered her things to leave, Teora realized that her training had become about much more than preparing to face Silas Hartmore. Somewhere between learning proper footwork and mastering defensive positions, she'd fallen completely, helplessly in love with Caspian Thorne. And if the way he looked at her was any indication, if the careful way he avoided being alone with her after particularly intense sessions meant anything, she wasn't alone in her feelings. The question was, how long could they both pretend that what was happening between them was purely professional? Walking home through the Brooklyn streets, her body still humming from his touch, Teora admitted to herself that she didn't want to pretend much longer. Tomorrow night's training session couldn't come fast enough. Chapter 4. 2 years of secrets and growing love. Blood and sweat painted the training mat beneath them as Caspian's powerful frame pressed against Teora's back, his whispered instructions sending shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with exhaustion. 18 months. She'd been training with him for 18 months now, and her body had transformed into something lethal. But more dangerous than her newfound fighting skills was the way her heart raced every time Caspian looked at her with those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Perfect form, he murmured against her ear as he guided her through an advanced combination, his chest flush against her shoulders. But you're still holding back the killing blow. In a real fight, hesitation gets you destroyed. They were alone in the academy's private room again. The main gym closed hours ago. These late-night sessions had become sacred to both of them, a world where only they existed, where the line between training and something infinitely more intimate grew thinner each day. "Show me again," she whispered, turning in his arms. The movement brought them face to face, breathing hard from the intense drilling, bodies slick with perspiration and practically molded together. "Teora," he said, her name rough on his tongue. His hands were still on her waist from the training position, and neither of them moved to break the contact. "We can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" But she knew exactly what he meant. The stolen glances, the touches that lingered longer than professionally necessary, the way they found excuses to stay close during training, bodies pressed together under the guise of technique instruction. "You know what?" he said softly, his thumb unconsciously stroking along her ribcage where his hand rested. "This is getting dangerous." She looked up at him, seeing her own struggle reflected in his eyes. The training is perfect. You're perfect. That's the problem." Before she could respond, he stepped back, putting professional distance between them with visible effort, but the air still crackled with electricity, and she could see the pulse hammering in his throat. "Let's work on defense," he said, his voice strained. "If you're going to fight someone bigger and stronger, you need to make every move count." The next hour passed in a blur of intimate contact disguised as training. Him showing her how to break holds by wrapping her legs around his waist, teaching her pressure points by running his fingers along her throat, her wrists, the soft spots where arteries lay close to skin, demonstrating escapes that required her body beneath his, protected and caged by his strength. By the end of the session, they were both wound tight with tension that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "I should go," she said, but made no move toward her bag. "You should," he agreed, but stepped closer instead of giving her space to leave. They stood there for a heartbeat, the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, shattering the spell. The next morning, Sabria was waiting in Teora's kitchen with coffee and worry written across her features. "We need to talk," her mother said without preamble, "about whatever you've been doing for the past year and a half." Teora's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean you disappear every evening. You come home exhausted and bruised. Your body has completely changed. You've got muscle definition I've never seen on anyone except professional athletes." Sabria's eyes were sharp with maternal concern. "And you've been researching something online that has you obsessed. I see the browser history, baby. Business news, legal precedents, articles about powerful men and justice. What's going on?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than Teora expected. She'd planned to wait until she turned 25, until she was stronger, until she had a foolproof plan. But looking at her mother's worried face, she realized keeping secrets was hurting both of them. "Mama," she said quietly, "I found grandmother's safe." Sabria's face went white. "What safe?" "Behind her portrait, the one with your diary, the legal documents, the photographs." Her mother sank into a chair as if her legs had given out. "Oh, God, I hoped she'd destroyed all of that. She kept it as evidence in case you ever wanted to fight back." Tears started flowing down Sabria's cheeks. "Fight back against who? What did you read?" "Everything. I know about Silas Hartmore. I know he's my father. I know what he did to you." The confession hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. "You were never supposed to find out," Sabria whispered. "I wanted to protect you from that knowledge, from the danger of him knowing you exist." "I'm 20 years old, Mama. I can handle the truth." "No, you can't." Sabria's voice cracked with 20 years of suppressed fear. "You don't understand his power. He could destroy us both with a phone call. The training, the research, whatever you're planning, you need to stop before he finds out." Teora knelt beside her mother's chair, taking her hands. "I'm not stopping. I've been training for 18 months to become strong enough to face him. I'm going to make him pay for what he did to our family." "How?" "You think you can fight Silas Hartmore? He's got security, lawyers, connections everywhere. You're one girl against an empire." "I'm going to challenge him in the ring. It's the one place his money and power can't protect him." Sabria stared at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. "The boxing training. That's what this has all been about." "I'm good, Mama, really good. My trainer says I have natural talent and I've been working harder than anyone else in the gym." "Your trainer?" Sabria's voice sharpened. "Tell me about this trainer." Heat flooded Teora's cheeks before she could stop it. "His name is Caspian Thorne. He used to fight professionally before he retired. He's been teaching me everything." "And how do you feel about him?" The question caught Teora off guard. He's an excellent teacher." "That's not what I asked." Teora looked away, unable to meet her mother's knowing gaze. "It doesn't matter how I feel about him. This is about justice, not romance." "Baby," Sabria said gently, "life is complicated. Sometimes we find love in the middle of seeking justice. Sometimes love makes us stronger. but sometimes it makes us vulnerable in ways we don't expect. That evening, Teora arrived at the gym emotionally raw from her conversation with her mother. Caspian took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, guiding her to a quiet corner of the training room. "My mother knows about the training. She figured out what I've been doing. And she's terrified. She thinks I'm going to get myself killed." Caspian was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Maybe she's right to be scared. You've never told me exactly who you're planning to fight, but whoever it is has you more driven than anyone I've ever trained. What aren't you telling me?" The question hung between them, loaded with 18 months of trust, attraction, and unspoken feelings. Teora realized she was at another crossroads: continue keeping secrets from the man she was falling in love with, or risk everything by telling him the truth. "If I tell you," she said quietly, "everything changes. You might not want to train me anymore. Try me." She looked into his amber eyes, seeing patience and something deeper, something that looked like love, though neither of them had been brave enough to name it. "The man I'm planning to fight," she began, "is my father. He destroyed my mother's life 20 years ago, and I'm going to make him pay for it in the only place where his power can't protect him." Caspian's expression didn't change, but she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Silas Hartmore," he said quietly. She nodded, surprised he'd made the connection so quickly. "I've been wondering why you watch every news report about his fights, why you know his fighting style better than his own trainers probably do." He stepped closer, and this time there was no pretense of professional distance. "What he did to your family, it's unforgivable. So you'll still train me?" "I'll do more than that," he said, reaching out to cup her face with gentle hands. "I'll make sure you destroy him." The promise in his voice, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, the way he touched her like she was something precious, it all combined to shatter the last of her resistance. "Caspian," she whispered, rising on her toes toward him. "We shouldn't," he said, but his head was already lowering toward hers. "I don't care," she breathed against his lips. When he kissed her, it was like a dam bursting. 18 months of attraction, admiration, and growing love poured out in that single moment of connection. His lips were gentle but demanding, his hands threading through her hair as he pulled her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he whispered. "I know. We're not just trainer and student anymore." "No," she agreed. "We're partners." "Partners," he repeated, sealing the word with another kiss that tasted like promises and justice and love all wrapped together. Chapter 5. The Perfect Opportunity. The morning news exploded across the gym's television screen like a gift from the gods of vengeance. Business mogul Darius Kane announces the most anticipated charity fight event of the year, the anchor announced as Teora froze mid-punch, her gloved fist suspended inches from the heavy bag. The Titans of Industry boxing tournament will feature CEO Silas Hartmore defending his undefeated record against any qualified challenger willing to step into the ring. 2 full years of training had led to this moment. 2 years of bleeding, sweating, and falling deeper in love with the man who transformed her from an angry young woman into a lethal weapon. Now, watching Silas Hartmore's arrogant face fill the screen, Teora felt every muscle in her body coil with anticipation. "Turn it up," she called to Caspian, who was adjusting equipment across the room. He glanced at the screen, then at her face, and immediately understood. Moving to the remote, he increased the volume as the reporter continued. The event, promoted by Kane Entertainment and scheduled for Madison Square Garden, will donate all proceeds to disadvantaged youth programs. Hartmore, known for his warrior CEO persona, has issued an open challenge to any fighter with legitimate professional credentials. Legitimate professional credentials, Teora repeated, her mind racing. After 2 years of intensive training at Westbrook Elite Academy, she certainly qualified. But getting accepted would require careful maneuvering. The mystery challenger must submit a complete fighter profile and undergo medical clearance, the reporter added. Kane Entertainment promises the most dramatic reveal in sports entertainment history. Perfect. They wanted drama. She'd give them drama that would shatter the business world. "You're thinking about entering," Caspian said, appearing beside her with the quiet grace that still made her pulse quicken after all these months together. "I'm not thinking about it," she replied, pulling off her training gloves. "I'm doing it." He studied her face with those amber eyes that could read her better than anyone else ever had. 3 months had passed since their first kiss. 3 months of growing closer while dancing around the deeper implications of their relationship. They trained together by day, shared dinner most evenings, and carefully maintained separate apartments despite the magnetic pull that drew them together constantly. "It's perfect timing," she continued, excitement building in her voice. 2 years of training, and now this opportunity falls into our lap. "Our lap?" His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the possessive undertone. "You're with me on this, aren't you?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. They'd never explicitly discussed what would happen when the time came to actually face Silas Hartmore. Instead of answering directly, he stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the honest sweat of his own workout. "Do you even need to ask?" Relief flooded through her. "So you'll help me prepare the application?" "I'll do more than that." His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking along her cheekbones. "I'll make sure you're ready to destroy him." The fierce protectiveness in his voice, the way he touched her like she was something precious and dangerous simultaneously, sent heat spiraling through her entire body. Even after 3 months of stolen kisses and growing intimacy, he still affected her like this. "Caspian," she whispered, rising on her toes toward him. "Not here," he murmured against her lips, glancing around the public gym space. "Tonight, my place. We'll plan your application and then—" He trailed off, but the promise in his eyes made her stomach flutter with anticipation. That evening, Teora sat curled against Caspian's side on his couch, laptop balanced on her knees as they crafted the fighter profile for T. Delacroix. His apartment above the gym was small but comfortable, filled with books about boxing strategy and photographs of fighters from throughout history. "We need documentation of your training record," he said, his arm tightening around her shoulders as he read over the application requirements. "Medical clearances, sparring videos, professional references." "Amelia will provide references," Teora said, typing notes. "And I've got 2 years of medical records from the Academy's physician." "The sparring videos need to show your skills without revealing your identity," Caspian mused, pressing a kiss to the top of her head that was becoming as natural as breathing. Face obscured, but technique clearly visible. They worked for hours, building a compelling case for T. Delacroix as a serious challenger while maintaining complete anonymity. Luna had helped with legal aspects, ensuring the application would meet professional standards without revealing personal information. "What about your fighting name?" Caspian asked as they neared completion. "T. Delacroix is generic. You need something that will stick in people's minds." "The Ghost," she said immediately. "Someone who appears from nowhere, strikes, and disappears." "Perfect." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You know, once we submit this application, there's no going back. Everything changes." "I know. And you're sure this is what you want? Not just revenge, but everything that comes with it? The media attention, the danger, the way it will affect everyone you care about?" She twisted in his arms to face him fully, studying the face that had become so dear to her. "Are you trying to talk me out of it?" "Number. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing. Because once you step into that ring with Silas Hartmore, you're not just fighting him. You're fighting his entire world, his power, his ability to destroy people who cross him." "He already destroyed my family once," she said quietly. "This is my chance to return the favor." "Our chance," he corrected, leaning down to capture her lips in a kiss that was both gentle and possessive. "Whatever happens, we face it together." When they broke apart, she saw something shift in his expression, a deepening of the connection that had been building between them for months. "Teora," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need you to know something." "What?" "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, transformative and terrifying and perfect all at once. She'd known it, felt it in every touch, every protective gesture, every moment he'd spent helping her prepare for this mission. But hearing him say it made everything real. "I love you too," she whispered, watching wonder bloom across his features. This kiss was different from all the others. Deeper, more urgent, carrying the weight of confession and promise. When his hands tangled in her hair, when she pressed closer against his chest, it felt like coming home and launching into space simultaneously. "We should submit the application," she murmured against his lips, even as her body melted into his touch. "Later," he said, standing and pulling her up with him. "Right now, I want to show you exactly how much I love you." He led her toward his bedroom, and she followed willingly, her heart hammering with excitement and desire, and the overwhelming certainty that whatever came next, they would face it as one. The application could wait until morning. Tonight was about them, about the love that had grown from shared purpose into something unbreakable. As Caspian's hands framed her face in the soft lamplight of his bedroom as he kissed her with reverent intensity, Teora realized that finding justice for her family had led her to something even more precious, a love worth fighting for, a partner who would stand with her against any storm. "I love you," she whispered again, the words feeling like a vow. "Always," he promised, sealing it with kisses that tasted like forever. Tomorrow, they would submit the application that would change everything. Tonight, they would celebrate the love that would give her the strength to face whatever came next. The morning light found them tangled together, laptop forgotten on the coffee table, the fighter profile complete and ready to send. As Teora stirred in Caspian's arms, she felt transformed, not just by their lovemaking, but by the absolute certainty that she was no longer alone in her quest for justice. "Ready to change the world," he murmured against her temple. "With you, I'm ready for anything." Together, they submitted the application that would bring T. Delacroix face to face with Silas Hartmore in the ring where money and power meant nothing, and justice would finally be served. Chapter 6. Complete Trust and Intimacy. The acceptance letter from Kane Entertainment arrived like a thunderbolt wrapped in official letterhead, its embossed logo and formal language carrying the weight of destiny itself. "Congratulations, Mr. T. Delacroix. Your application has been accepted for the Titans of Industry Championship bout against Silas Hartmore. Fight date, 6 weeks from today. Please report to Madison Square Garden for media obligations and final medical clearances 1 week prior to the event. This promises to be the most anticipated boxing match of the decade. 6 weeks. After 2 years of relentless preparation, after months of planning and dreaming and training until her hands bled and her muscles screamed, she had 6 weeks to transform from a highly skilled amateur into someone capable of defeating a man who'd been boxing professionally for 20 years and had never lost a fight. The letter continued with technical details. Weight requirements, drug testing protocols, media appearance schedules, legal disclaimers. But all Teora could focus on were those two words that changed everything. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Caspian said, reading over her shoulder in his apartment, where they'd taken to spending most of their evenings, their lives intertwined in ways that felt as natural as breathing. His arms came around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest in the gesture that had become as automatic as her heartbeat, as necessary as air. "Is it enough time?" she asked, leaning into his strength, drawing comfort from the solid warmth of his body against hers. 2 years of training felt simultaneously like a lifetime and like no time at all when faced with the reality of stepping into the ring with Silas Hartmore. "It has to be," he replied, his lips brushing against her temple with tender reassurance. "We're going to use every single day, every single hour, every single minute. When you step into that ring, you're going to be more than ready. You're going to be unstoppable, invincible, perfect." The next morning brought a fundamental shift in their entire approach to training. Gone were the foundational drills and general technique refinement that had occupied the previous 2 years. Now every session, every exercise, every moment of preparation was laser-focused on one specific opponent, Silas Hartmore, and his particular fighting style. "He's a southpaw," Caspian explained, adjusting the video setup in their private training room, where they'd compiled footage of every single one of Silas's documented fights. They'd studied him like generals planning a military campaign, analyzing patterns and weaknesses with obsessive detail. Left-handed fighters give most orthodox boxers trouble because they don't train against them enough. The angles are different, the timing is off, everything feels backwards and uncomfortable. "But I won't have trouble," Teora said with quiet confidence, wrapping her hands with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual thousands of times. The movements were automatic now, muscle memory built through repetition until she could do it perfectly, even in her sleep. "No, you won't, because for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to become your southpaw nightmare." He moved into position, mirror-imaging Silas's stance with eerie accuracy that spoke to his deep understanding of the sport. "I've been studying his footwork for months, his preferred combinations, his defensive habits, the way he thinks and reacts under pressure. I'm going to become him for you, so completely that fighting the real thing will feel like déjà vu." The transformation was remarkable and slightly unsettling to watch. When Caspian adopted Silas's fighting style, he became a different person entirely, more aggressive than his natural personality, less technical and refined, relying on power and intimidation rather than the skill and strategy that were his trademarks. He mimicked not just Silas's physical techniques, but his psychological approach, his swagger, even his pattern of trash talk between rounds. "He's going to try to end it early," Caspian explained as they moved through shadow boxing drills. "He's got 20 pounds on you and thinks he can overwhelm smaller opponents with brute force." "Let him try," Teora replied, her movements liquid and precise. 2 years of training had given her speed that was genuinely breathtaking and technique that made every punch count. Their evening sessions became intensely intimate in ways that went beyond the romantic relationship they'd built. This was preparation for battle at the most personal level, two people who loved each other completely working together toward a moment that would define both their futures. When Caspian held the pads for her combinations, absorbing the impact of punches that could break bones, he wasn't just her trainer, he was her partner in every sense of the word. When she worked on defensive patterns against his southpaw offense, slipping and weaving around attacks that came at unfamiliar angles, she wasn't just learning technique, she was preparing for war. When they studied video footage curled together on his couch, her head on his shoulder, as they dissected Silas's habits frame by frame, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. This was what partnership looked like. Not just romantic love, but shared purpose, mutual support, complete trust in each other's abilities and dedication. The physical intimacy of their relationship had deepened everything about their training. Now, when he corrected her form, his hands carried not just professional knowledge, but personal devotion. When she landed combinations that would have been impossible a year ago, their shared pride was expressed through kisses that tasted like accomplishment and promise. When exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her after particularly brutal sessions, his arms became her sanctuary, his whispered encouragement the fuel that kept her going. "Your left hook is becoming genuinely devastating," he told her one evening after a session that had left both of them drenched in sweat and breathing hard from the intensity of their work. They stood closer than strictly necessary, as had become their habit, drawn together by invisible magnetic force. "I can feel the power transfer through the pads when you connect. It's not just technique anymore. There's real violence behind it now." "Devastating enough to change history?" she asked, looking up into his amber eyes that reflected pride and love and absolute faith in her abilities. "Devastating enough to change everything." His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking along her cheekbones. "God, I love watching you fight. You move like violence made beautiful." The compliment sent heat spiraling through her entire body. "Caspian ... I know we should shower, eat dinner, review more footage," he murmured, stepping closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "But right now, all I can think about is how much I need you." "Then don't think," she whispered, rising on her toes to meet his kiss. What followed was urgent and desperate, hands roaming over sweat-slicked skin, mouths hungry with need that had been building through hours of intense physical training. They made love right there on the gym mats, surrounded by the equipment that was forging her into a weapon, and it felt like the most perfect expression of who they were together. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, catching their breath, Caspian traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I have something to tell you," he said quietly. "What?" she asked, turning in his arms to look at him. "I've been keeping track of the betting odds for your fight." She raised an eyebrow. "And? You're listed at 50-1 against, the longest odds in sports betting history." Instead of being discouraged, Teora smiled. "Perfect. That means no one sees this coming." "No one, except us." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "And when you destroy him, it's going to send shockwaves through everything." The weeks blurred together in a haze of preparation that consumed every aspect of their lives. Every morning brought new challenges designed to push her capabilities beyond what she'd thought possible. Sparring sessions where Caspian perfectly mimicked Silas's style until she could counter his every move, blindfolded, strength training designed to maximize her natural speed advantage without sacrificing power, strategy sessions where they planned for every possible scenario the fight might present. Mental preparation became as important as physical conditioning. They practiced the psychological warfare that would inevitably be part of facing Silas. The trash talk during stare-downs, the intimidation tactics, the mind games that powerful men used to unsettle their opponents. Caspian would transform into Silas's arrogant persona, saying things designed to make her angry, to throw off her concentration, to make her abandon strategy for emotion. "You think you belong in the same ring as me?" he would sneer in perfect imitation of Silas's condescending tone. "I've been fighting since you were learning to walk. You're nothing but a publicity stunt, a warm-up act for the real fighters." At first, the psychological mimicry had been difficult for both of them. Caspian hated channeling such arrogance and cruelty, even in service of her training, and Teora struggled not to react emotionally to hearing such dismissive words, even knowing they were just practice. But gradually, they both learned to separate the training tool from their personal reality. But it was the quiet evenings that meant the most to Teora in those intense weeks. Cooking simple dinners together in Caspian's small kitchen, sharing stories about their childhoods and dreams for the future, reviewing fight footage while she massaged the tension from his shoulders after he'd spent hours absorbing her most powerful shots. These peaceful interludes reminded her that she wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. She was fighting for their future together, for the right to build something beautiful without the shadow of injustice hanging over them. "Tell me again why you retired," she said one night, tracing the scar along his temple as they lay in bed. "Detached retina," he replied, catching her hand and pressing it flat against his chest. "Doctor said one more significant headshot could cause permanent damage, maybe blindness. Do you ever regret it? Giving up your career?" He was quiet for a long moment, and she wondered if she'd asked the wrong question. Then he turned to look at her directly. "I thought I did, until I met you. Now I realize everything in my life led me to this moment, to being the person who could help you become who you're meant to be." "And who am I meant to be?" "The woman who brings justice to those who thought they were untouchable. The fighter who proves that skill and heart can overcome money and power." He kissed her softly. "The love of my life." With 3 weeks remaining until the fight, Luna brought news that sent a chill through both of them, a reminder that the outside world hadn't forgotten about their mission. "Someone's been asking questions about T. Delacroix," she said, joining them for dinner at Caspian's apartment, her usually confident demeanor replaced by obvious concern. "Legal channels, trying to get personal information from Kane Entertainment's database. Professional inquiries using law enforcement terminology and corporate intimidation tactics." "Silas's people?" Teora asked, though she already knew the answer. Oliver Cross's investigation had been inevitable. They'd always known that Silas wouldn't simply accept a mysterious challenger without trying to learn everything possible about his opponent. Most likely his head of security, Oliver Cross, former NYPD detective, knows all the tricks for extracting information without technically breaking any laws, Luna confirmed, pulling out a folder of documents. "He's been systematic about it, started with Kane Entertainment directly, moved to the Athletic Commission, then began tracing the paper trail of your application backwards." Caspian's jaw tightened visibly as he processed the implications. "How close are they to figuring out your identity?" "Not close," Luna assured them, though her expression remained serious. "The privacy protections we built into your application are holding strong. Fighter confidentiality laws are surprisingly robust, and Kane Entertainment has a vested interest in maintaining the mystery for publicity purposes. They can verify your training credentials, medical clearances, and legal eligibility, but personal details are sealed behind multiple layers of legal protection. Still," she continued, "we need to be even more careful than we have been. Oliver Cross isn't the type to give up easily. If he can't get information through official channels, he'll start looking for other approaches: surveillance, background investigations of your known associates, financial records analysis." The reminder that they were playing a dangerous game with a powerful enemy cast a shadow over their preparation, but it also strengthened their resolve. They'd come too far to be intimidated now. "We will be," Teora said, but privately she felt a thrill of anticipation. Let Oliver Cross investigate all he wanted. When she stepped into that ring, when she removed her hood and revealed her identity, the investigation wouldn't matter anymore. The final 2 weeks of preparation were the most intense of Teora's life. Every spare moment was spent training, studying, preparing. Her body had become a perfectly tuned instrument of violence, every muscle fiber optimized for speed and power. "You're ready," Caspian told her the night before they were scheduled to leave for New York and the final week of preparation. "More than ready. You're going to walk into Madison Square Garden and rewrite history." "We're going to rewrite history," she corrected, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted like promises and victory and love all wrapped together. "Together," he agreed, sealing the word against her lips. Tomorrow, they would begin the final chapter of her quest for justice. Tonight, they celebrated the love that had made it all possible, the partnership that would carry them through whatever came next. As Teora fell asleep in Caspian's arms, she dreamed of stepping into that ring, of removing her hood, of watching Silas Hartmore's face when he realized that the daughter he'd tried to erase had returned to claim her justice. 6 weeks had become tomorrow. Tomorrow had become destiny. Chapter 7. Lovers preparing for war. The motel room mirror reflected 2 warriors preparing for battle, but all Teora could see was the way Caspian's hands trembled slightly as he wrapped her knuckles with infinite care and devotion. They'd moved to a seedy motel outside Manhattan 3 weeks before the fight, abandoning the gym and their normal routines to avoid Oliver Cross's intensifying investigation. The cramped room with its faded floral wallpaper, creaky bed, and ancient air conditioning unit that rattled like a dying animal had become their entire world. War room, sanctuary, and love nest all rolled into one. The transformation of this dingy space into something sacred spoke to the depth of their connection. Training equipment was scattered across every available surface. Strategic notes covered the walls like battle plans. Their laptop sat permanently open on the small table, cycling through footage of Silas's fights that they'd analyze frame by frame until they knew his every habit, every tell, every weakness. But despite the serious purpose that had brought them here, the room also bore the intimate traces of their life together. His cologne mixed with her perfume in the air, their clothes intermingled in the single dresser drawer, the way they moved around each other in the small space, with the unconscious choreography of lovers who knew each other's rhythms perfectly. "Slower on the left," Caspian murmured, his fingers gentle and reverent against her knuckles as he wound the protective tape with the precision of a ritual performed countless times. "You favor that hand when you're nervous, and I can feel the tension in your muscles." "I'm not nervous," she lied, watching his amber eyes in the mirror as he concentrated on his task. Even after months of being together, even after all the intimate moments they'd shared, the sight of his focused face as he performed this tender ritual made her heart race with love and gratitude and desire. "Liar," he said softly, pressing a kiss to her newly wrapped knuckles before moving to the other hand. "It's okay to be nervous. Nerves keep you sharp, keep you from getting overconfident, but don't let them make you tense." The morning news played softly on the ancient television, its volume barely audible, but its content impossible to ignore. Silas Hartmore's confident face filled the screen as he gave yet another arrogant interview about his upcoming mystery opponent, his smugness making Teora's jaw clench involuntarily. "Some amateur thinks he can step into the ring with me?" Silas laughed, his arrogance so complete it was almost breathtaking. "I've been boxing for 20 years, training with the best coaches money can buy, fighting men who've spent their entire lives perfecting this sport. This ghost character is going to learn the hard way that real fighting isn't a game for pretenders and publicity seekers. I'll probably end this in the first round. It'll be over so fast the audience won't get their money's worth." The casual dismissal in his voice, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable, the way he spoke about crushing an opponent he'd never seen, it all combined to fuel the fire that had been burning in Teora's chest for 2 years. "Turn it off," Caspian said quietly, noticing the way her muscles had tensioned, the way her breathing had changed as anger coursed through her system. I want to hear what he says. I want to remember every word, every dismissive laugh, every arrogant assumption." Her voice was cold, controlled, but underneath it was molten steel. "I want to hear him now so I can remember it when I'm standing over him in 2 weeks. I'll tell you what he says." "The same thing he always says," Caspian replied, his hands stilling on her wrist wrappings as he met her eyes in the mirror. "That he's invincible, that money equals power, that people like us don't matter, that we're beneath his notice. But in 2 weeks, you're going to prove him wrong about everything he believes." The intensity in his voice, the absolute faith she heard there, made her turn in his arms. They were both in training clothes, both glistening with sweat from their morning session, both wound tight with anticipation and desire that seemed to grow stronger every day. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real," she whispered, reaching up to trace the scar along his temple. "That we're really going to do this. What feels unreal? The fight, or us?" "Both. All of it." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "2 years ago, I was just an angry girl who'd discovered a terrible secret. Now you're a woman who's going to change everything," he finished, his hands coming up to frame her face. "And you're mine." The possessive note in his voice sent fire through her veins. Even after all this time, he could still affect her like this with just a word, a touch, a look. "Prove it," she whispered against his lips. What followed was urgent and desperate, hands tearing at training clothes, mouths hungry with need. They made love against the motel room wall with the intensity of people who knew everything was about to change, who needed to claim each other completely before facing the storm ahead. Afterward, as they lay tangled together on the narrow bed, Caspian traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I have something for you," he said quietly. "What?" He reached into his discarded pants pocket and pulled out a small velvet box that made her breath catch. Caspian ... "It's not what you think," he said quickly, though his eyes were nervous. "I mean, it is, but not yet. Not until after the fight." With trembling fingers, she opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring, not an engagement ring, but something more subtle and meaningful. "It's a promise ring," he explained, his voice rough with emotion. "A promise that no matter what happens in 2 weeks, we face whatever comes next together. A promise that when the dust settles, when justice is served, I want to spend the rest of my life loving you." Tears blurred her vision as she looked at the ring, then at his face. Caspian ... "You don't have to wear it now if you don't want to. I just needed you to know that this isn't just about the fight for me. This is about our future." Instead of answering with words, she kissed him with everything she had, all her love, her gratitude, her absolute certainty that he was her partner in every sense of the word. "Put it on me," she whispered when they broke apart. His hands shook slightly as he slipped the ring onto her right hand, and she understood why he'd chosen that finger instead of her left. This wasn't about traditional engagement. This was about their unique partnership, their shared mission, their love forged in preparation for war. Their training intensified over the following days. Every session was precise, focused, designed to prepare her for the specific challenges Silas would present. Caspian had studied footage until he could mirror Silas's fighting style perfectly, becoming her father for hours at a time so she could learn to destroy him. "He'll try to intimidate you during the stare-down," Caspian explained as they worked through psychological preparation. "He's used to opponents being awed by his reputation, his wealth, his presence. I won't be intimidated. I know you won't. But I want you to be prepared for the moment he realizes he's fighting a woman. That's going to throw him completely off his game." They practiced the reveal over and over, the moment she would remove her hood and let her identity explode across the arena. Each time they rehearsed it, Teora felt more confident, more ready to watch her father's world crumble. One evening, as they reviewed final strategy notes over takeout Chinese food, Luna called with news that made both their hearts stop. "Oliver Cross is getting close," she said without preamble. "He's traced T. Delacroix to Brooklyn, to the Westbrook Academy. He can't get personal information yet, but he's asking the right questions." "How close?" Caspian asked, his hand finding Teora's across the small motel table. "Close enough that Amelia had to lawyer up. The gym's not giving out any information, but he knows someone there trained your mystery fighter." Teora felt a chill of fear, not for herself, but for the people who'd helped her. Can he hurt Amelia? The academy? Not legally, but Silas has other ways of hurting people who cross him. After Luna hung up, Teora and Caspian sat in heavy silence, the weight of approaching consequences settling over them. "We could call it off," he said quietly, though everything in his posture suggested he didn't want to. "No." Her voice was steel. "We've come too far to back down now. Besides, in 10 days it won't matter what Oliver Cross knows. The truth will be out there for the whole world to see." 10 days, he repeated, lifting her hand to kiss the promise ring he'd placed there. "Are you ready for everything to change?" "As long as you're with me, I'm ready for anything. Always," he promised, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like forever, and justice and love all wrapped together. The final week blurred past in a haze of last-minute preparations. Media attention around the mystery bout reached fever pitch, with speculation running wild about the identity of the ghost who would face Silas Hartmore. The betting odds had shifted slightly, from 50-1 to 30-1, but Teora was still considered the ultimate underdog. Perfect. No one would see her victory coming until it was too late. 3 nights before the fight, as they lay in each other's arms in the narrow motel bed, Caspian whispered words that would carry her through everything that was coming. "Whatever happens in that ring, remember that you're not alone anymore. You're not the abandoned daughter fighting for scraps of justice. You're a warrior with people who love you, who believe in you, who will stand with you no matter what." "I love you," she whispered back, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd built together. "I love you too. Now let's go make history." 2 days. In 2 days, she would step into Madison Square Garden and face the man who'd destroyed her family. In 2 days, justice would finally be served. But tonight, she was just a woman in love, holding tight to the man who'd helped her become everything she was meant to be. Chapter 8. The investigation reaches its limits. The knock on their motel room door at 3 a.m. shattered the silence like gunfire, and Teora's eyes snapped open with the instant alertness of someone who'd been expecting this moment. "Stay calm," Caspian whispered against her ear, his arm tightening protectively around her waist. Through the thin curtains, they could see the silhouette of a single man, tall, broad-shouldered, patient. Oliver Cross. It had to be. Teora slipped from the bed and moved to the window, peering through a gap in the fabric. The man stood under the flickering motel light, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the seedy parking lot. He knocked again, 3 measured raps, then waited. "Mr. Delacroix?" he called through the door, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to intimidating people into compliance. "I know you're in there. Your rental car is still warm, and the front desk clerk was very helpful about confirming your check-in time. I just want to talk. 5 minutes of civilized conversation between professionals." Caspian had moved silently to stand beside her, both of them frozen in the shadows like prey animals sensing a predator. Through the gap in the curtains, they could see Oliver clearly now, tall, broad-shouldered, expensively dressed, with the patient bearing of someone who had done this kind of thing many times before. He stood under the flickering motel sign, with his hands clasped behind his back, every inch the consummate corporate fixer. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Oliver continued, his tone reasonable, almost friendly. "Quite the opposite, actually. I'm here to offer you a business proposition that I think you'll find very attractive. My employer has been watching your career with great interest, Mr. Delacroix. Your training record is impressive, your technique is clearly advanced, and you've generated significant buzz in the media. But Mr. Hartmore is wondering if perhaps you'd be interested in a different kind of arrangement, one that would be financially beneficial for everyone involved." Teora's blood chilled. A business proposition, just like the one Silas had offered her mother 21 years ago. Take the money and disappear, or face the consequences. "My employer is concerned about next week's bout," Oliver said when they remained silent. "You've generated significant interest, Mr. Delacroix. The mystery, the build-up, it's all very dramatic. But Mr. Hartmore is wondering if perhaps you'd be interested in a different kind of arrangement. Through the window, they watched him pull out his phone and check something, then return it to his pocket with the patience of a man who had all night. $1 million, he said clearly, letting the number hang in the air like a golden carrot. Cash. Deposited in any account you specify, anywhere in the world. Switzerland, Cayman Islands, cryptocurrency if you prefer. We're flexible about the delivery method. All you have to do is not show up next week, claim an injury during training, a family emergency, food poisoning. We don't care what excuse you use. Just disappear from the public eye and you'll be very wealthy. Wealthy enough to never have to fight again, to live anywhere you want, to buy anything you desire. Teora felt Caspian's hand find hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers as they listened to the echo of her family's history repeating itself. The same kind of offer Silas had made to her mother 21 years ago. Take the money and make the problem disappear. If you're not interested in money, Oliver continued after a pause, his voice taking on a harder, more menacing edge, perhaps we can discuss other arrangements. Careers can be fragile things, Mr. Delacroix. Training facilities sometimes lose their operating licenses due to unexpected safety violations. Gyms face sudden health department inspections that find serious code violations. Friends and family members discover that life can become very complicated very quickly when they cross certain powerful interests. The threat was clear, delivered with the casual precision of someone who'd made such offers many times before. You have 30 seconds to open this door and have a civilized conversation, Oliver said, checking his watch. After that I leave and tomorrow morning, people you care about start having very bad days. Teora started toward the door, but Caspian caught her wrist, shaking his head urgently. They stood frozen for a long moment, listening to Oliver's measured breathing through the thin wood. Then, after exactly 30 seconds, they heard his footsteps walking away across the gravel parking lot. A car door slammed, an engine started, and taillights disappeared into the night. Jesus, Caspian breathed, pulling her against his chest. He found us. But he didn't see us, Teora said, her mind racing. He knows T. Delacroix is staying here, but he doesn't know who T. Delacroix really is. Does it matter if he can threaten Amelia, Luna, your mother? The thought of her loved ones facing Silas's retribution made Teora's stomach clench with fear and fury, but it also crystallized her resolve. Then we make sure the fight happens before he can follow through, she said firmly. 1 week, Caspian. In 1 week, none of his threats will matter because the truth will be out there for the world to see. They didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, they packed quickly and checked out of the motel before dawn, driving deeper into Queens to find another hiding place. By the time the sun rose, they were settled in a different motel, this one even more anonymous than the last. We need to warn everyone, Teora said as soon as they were secure. Luna answered her phone on the first ring, alert despite the early hour. Are you okay? Oliver Cross found our motel last night. He offered me $1 million to throw the fight. Shit. What did you do? Nothing. We stayed hidden, but he threatened to come after people we care about if I don't disappear. There was a long pause. I can protect myself legally, and I've got friends who can make sure nothing happens to me that can be traced back to Silas. But Teora, your mother. I know. The fear in her voice was audible. Can you get her somewhere safe for the next week? Already on it. I'm sending a car to pick her up within the hour. She'll be staying with my family upstate until after the fight. Relief flooded through Teora. Thank you. What about Amelia? The academy. Amelia can take care of herself, Caspian said, having taken the phone. She's been dealing with powerful men trying to intimidate her for 40 years, but we should probably warn her. When they called Amelia, her response was exactly what they'd expected. "That corporate thug thinks he can scare me?" She laughed, though there was steel in her voice. "Honey, I've been threatened by better men than Silas Hartmore. Let him try to shut down my gym. I've got lawyers, connections, and a very long memory for people who cross me." "Just be careful," Teora pleaded. "You be careful. I'll be fine. Now, how are you feeling about next week?" "Ready," Teora said, and meant it. If anything, Oliver's visit had only strengthened her resolve. The pattern was clear. When faced with challenges to his power, Silas Hartmore didn't fight fair. He used money, threats, intimidation, just like he'd done to her mother. "Good," Amelia said, "because when you step into that ring, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone he's ever tried to silence." The week passed in a blur of final preparations and careful hiding. They moved motels every other day, paid only in cash, avoided any patterns that might help Oliver track them down. Meanwhile, media coverage of the fight reached fever pitch. "The Ghost remains the most mysterious fighter in boxing history," one sports commentator announced. "No interviews, no public appearances, no social media presence. Vegas oddsmakers have settled on 25-1 against, making this the biggest underdog story in sports." "Silas Hartmore seems supremely confident," another reporter added. "He's been giving interviews all week, promising to unmask this pretender and prove that amateur theatrics are no match for professional experience." Watching Silas's arrogant interviews, Teora felt her anger crystallize into something pure and cold. He truly believed he was untouchable, that his money and power made him invincible. Tomorrow night, she would prove him wrong. "How do you feel?" Caspian asked, as they lay in bed the night before the fight, their bodies intertwined in the way that had become as natural as breathing. "Like I've been waiting for this moment my entire life," she said honestly. "Scared, excited, ready, everything at once." "I'll be right there with you," he promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "In your corner, in your heart, every step of the way." "I know." She turned in his arms to look at him directly. "Caspian, no matter what happens tomorrow night, I want you to know that falling in love with you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even better than getting your revenge. Even better than getting justice," she corrected. "Because justice is what I owe my mother, my family. But loving you, that's something I chose for myself." He kissed her then with infinite tenderness, and they made love one more time before the fight that would change everything, holding each other with desperate intensity, as if they could stop time and stay in this moment forever. But morning came anyway, bringing with it the day that would rewrite history. As they prepared to leave for Madison Square Garden, Teora looked at herself in the bathroom mirror one last time. Tomorrow, the whole world would know her name. Tomorrow, Silas Hartmore would finally face the consequences of his actions. Tonight, she was ready for war. Chapter 9. The Night of Reckoning. The roar of 20,000 bloodthirsty spectators crashed over Madison Square Garden like a tidal wave as the hooded figure stepped through the tunnel, but all Teora could hear was her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. This was it. 2 years of training, months of planning, a lifetime of waiting for justice, all culminating in this moment as she walked toward the ring where her father waited, completely unaware that his past was about to destroy his future. "You ready for this?" Caspian whispered beside her, his hand briefly touching her gloved fist, in the only gesture of comfort the cameras wouldn't catch. "I've never been more ready for anything," she replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. The arena was a circus of wealth and power. Manhattan's elite filled the ringside seats. Business leaders, celebrities, politicians, socialites, all here to watch Silas Hartmore demolish another challenger and cement his reputation as the invincible warrior CEO. The irony wasn't lost on her that these same people would witness his complete destruction. Diamond-encrusted women sipped champagne while discussing their latest acquisitions. Wall Street titans made side bets on how quickly Silas would end the fight. Celebrity guests posed for photos, treating the event like a glamorous social gathering rather than a serious athletic competition. The air hummed with conversations about stock portfolios, charity galas, and political connections, the ecosystem of power that Silas had inhabited and exploited for decades. Silas was already in the ring, playing to the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. At 48, he was still impressive, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds of muscle and arrogance, moving with the swagger of a man who believed himself invincible. His red silk shorts bore his company logo, turning even this moment into a branding opportunity. His entourage of trainers, handlers, and hangers-on filled his corner like courtiers attending a king. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, introducing the challenger, fighting out of Brooklyn, New York, with a professional record shrouded in mystery, the Ghost. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Curiosity, skepticism, and scattered boos from Silas's supporters. As Teora climbed through the ropes, keeping her hood pulled low, she caught glimpses of the media frenzy surrounding the ring. Cameras flashed like lightning, reporters shouted questions that would never be answered. "And in the red corner," the announcer continued, "the undefeated warrior CEO with a record of 15 wins, 0 losses, Silas Hartmore." The ovation was deafening. Silas raised his gloves in triumph, basking in the adoration of people who had no idea what kind of man they were cheering for. In her corner, Caspian made final adjustments to her gloves while whispering last-minute strategy. "Remember, he's going to try to end it early, weather the storm, let him punch himself out, then show him what real skill looks like." "I remember everything," she said, looking across the ring at the man who had destroyed her mother's life. 2 years of preparation for this moment. The referee called them to center ring for final instructions, and Teora found herself face to face with Silas Hartmore for the first time in her life. This close, she could see traces of her own features in his face. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn jawline. The recognition made her stomach churn, but it also fueled her determination. "You picked the wrong man to mess with, kid," Silas said with casual arrogance, looking down at her hooded figure. "I've been doing this since before you were born." If only he knew how literally true that statement was. "We'll see," she replied, keeping her voice deliberately low and rough. As they touched gloves, Silas's expression showed nothing but contempt for what he assumed was just another amateur looking to make a name off his reputation. Perfect. Let him underestimate her right up until the moment everything changed. Back in her corner, Caspian gripped her shoulders one last time. "This is it, baby. Everything we've worked for. Go show the world who you really are." The bell rang, and 20 years of injustice demanded their reckoning. Silas came out aggressive, just as they'd predicted, trying to overwhelm her with power and intimidation. His first combination was wild and overcommitted, exactly the kind of mistake that 2 years of technical training had prepared her to exploit. She slipped his right hook by inches and countered with a left jab that snapped his head back, drawing the first gasp from the crowd. The punch was perfect, fast, precise, and harder than anything he'd expected from his mysterious opponent. "What the hell?" she heard him mutter as they circled each other. Round after round, the pattern continued with surgical precision. Silas would charge forward with brute force, telegraphing every punch like an amateur, and Teora would make him miss by centimeters, counter with devastating accuracy, then dance away before he could respond. Her footwork was poetry in motion, her timing absolutely perfect, her technique so advanced that even the partisan crowd began to murmur in reluctant appreciation. "Unbelievable," the ringside commentator called into his microphone. "The Ghost is making Hartmore look like a complete beginner. This is supposed to be a 20-year veteran in there, but he's being schooled by a complete unknown." By the third round, blood was trickling from a cut above Silas's left eye, where a precise jab had opened the skin. His expensive hairstyle was disheveled, sweat streaming down his face as he realized this wasn't going according to plan. The fourth round brought visible swelling around his right cheekbone and a growing expression of confusion and frustration that the cameras captured in brutal detail. His corner was shouting conflicting advice, his trainer looking increasingly desperate as their fighter was systematically dismantled. "How is this possible?" she heard one ringside socialite ask her companion. "Silas has never even been hurt before, and this nobody is destroying him." In the fifth round, Teora began to vary her attack patterns, switching from head to body shots that doubled Silas over, then back to combinations that snapped his head back. Each punch was calculated, precise, designed not just to score points, but to break down his will to fight. In the sixth round, Teora began to increase the pressure. A beautiful combination to the body doubled Silas over, followed by an uppercut that sent him staggering backward. The crowd was on its feet now, sensing that they were witnessing something historic. "Stay focused," Caspian called from her corner between rounds. "You're breaking him. 2 more rounds and you can end this." But Teora didn't want to end it quickly anymore. She wanted Silas to suffer, to feel every moment of the humiliation he'd put her mother through. She wanted him conscious and aware when she revealed the truth. The 8th round was pure domination. Every punch she threw found its target. Every combination flowed like water. She was boxing at a level that transcended technique and entered the realm of art, and even Silas's supporters were beginning to cheer for her. As the 9th round began, Silas was battered, exhausted, and running on pure ego. His corner should have stopped the fight already, but his pride wouldn't let him quit. "Come on," he gasped, blood streaming from his nose. "Who are you?" "Soon," she thought. "Very soon you'll know exactly who I am." The final round was a masterpiece of controlled violence. Teora picked her shots carefully, methodically dismantling what remained of Silas's defenses. With 30 seconds left, she landed a perfect left hook that sent him crashing to the canvas. The crowd erupted as the referee began counting, but Teora knew Silas would get up. His pride would force him to his feet for the final humiliation. Sure enough, at the count of 8, he struggled upright, swaying but determined to continue. The final bell rang with both fighters standing, but there was no question about who had won. The scorecards would be a formality. This had been complete domination from the opening bell. As the decision was announced, as the crowd celebrated the shocking, upset victory, Teora stood in the center of the ring and slowly reached for her hood. This was the moment she had dreamed of for 2 years, the moment when justice would finally be served. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, taking the microphone as the arena fell silent with anticipation, "before I reveal my identity, there's something you need to know about the man you've been cheering for." Silas, still reeling from the beating he'd taken, looked up at her with growing alarm. 20 years ago, Silas Hartmore seduced a young woman who worked in his house. When she became pregnant and refused his blood money, he had her framed for theft and destroyed her life. The silence in the arena was absolute now, 20,000 people hanging on every word. That woman was my mother, and tonight, justice has finally come home. With that, she pulled back her hood, letting her long dark hair cascade down her shoulders as cameras captured the moment that would rewrite everything. The explosion of sound that followed, gasps, cheers, shouting, was unlike anything Madison Square Garden had ever heard. But all Tiora could see was Silas Hartmore's face as he realized that the daughter he'd tried to erase had just destroyed him in front of the watching world. Chapter 10. The Daughter's Complete Victory. The silence that followed Teora's revelation lasted exactly 3 heartbeats before Madison Square Garden erupted into absolute chaos. 20,000 voices exploded simultaneously, gasps of shock, roars of approval, reporters screaming into phones, cameras flashing like lightning storms. But through it all, Teora's eyes never left Silas Hartmore's face, as the terrible truth destroyed him more completely than her fists ever could. "No," he whispered, staggering backward against the ropes. "It's not possible. You're dead. The pregnancy." She said nothing, Teora replied, stepping closer as he recoiled from her. "She raised me alone, worked 3 jobs to keep us alive, and never once told me your name. I found out the truth myself." The cameras captured every moment, his shock, his horror, his complete disintegration as 20 years of buried guilt crashed down on him. This wasn't just a boxing defeat. This was the complete destruction of everything he'd built his life on. "Ladies and gentlemen," a stunned announcer managed to say, "in the most shocking revelation in sports history, the mystery fighter known as the Ghost is Teora Delacroix, the daughter of Silas Hartmore, born from a relationship he denied 20 years ago." Security tried to restore order, but the arena was beyond control. Business associates fled toward exits, reporters swarmed the ring, and social media exploded with footage that would circle the globe within minutes. Through the chaos, Caspian vaulted into the ring and swept Teora into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. They'd done it. After 2 years of preparation, months of training, and a lifetime of waiting, justice had finally been served. "You were magnificent," he whispered against her ear, his voice rough with emotion and pride. "Absolutely magnificent." "We did it," she replied, holding him tight as the madness swirled around them. "We actually did it." But their celebration was interrupted by Silas, who had found his voice again, his shock transforming into the rage of a cornered animal. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled, pointing an accusatory finger at her. "You think some sob story erases what you've done? I'll destroy you for this. I'll destroy everyone you care about. I have power you can't imagine." Teora looked at him with something approaching pity. Even in defeat, even with his world crumbling around him, he still thought money and threats could save him. "Your power was always an illusion," she said calmly, "built on lies, maintained by fear. Tonight, everyone sees who you really are." As if to prove her point, she noticed Oliver Cross pushing through the crowd toward them, but his usual confidence was gone. When their eyes met across the ring, he simply shook his head and melted back into the chaos. Even Silas's most loyal enforcer knew this was over. The aftermath became a blur of interviews, legal consultations, and media frenzy. Luna appeared somehow, having fought her way through security with a team of lawyers. Sabria arrived via Luna's family car, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her daughter in the ring where justice had finally been served. "I'm so proud of you," Sabria whispered, holding Teora tight. "So proud and so scared and so grateful. You did what I never could." "We did it together, Mama. All of us." The fallout was immediate and devastating for Silas. Within hours, his board of directors called an emergency meeting. By morning, federal investigators had opened inquiries into his business practices. By week's end, his empire was crumbling as partners fled and investors demanded answers. But for Teora, the real victory wasn't Silas's destruction. It was the moment she realized she was free. free from the weight of secrets, free from the burden of injustice, free to build a future with the people she loved. 6 months later. The beach house in the Hamptons was a far cry from their cramped Brooklyn apartment, but Sabria had insisted on something beautiful for the wedding. "After 20 years of hiding," she'd said, "it's time we lived in the light." Teora stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, adjusting the simple but elegant dress she'd chosen. Through the window, she could see guests gathering on the lawn overlooking the ocean, a small group of people who truly mattered. "You ready for this?" Luna asked, appearing behind her with the bouquet. "I've never been more ready for anything," Teora replied, the same words she'd spoken before, stepping into the ring 6 months ago. But this time, they carried joy instead of determination, love instead of justice. A knock at the door announced Caspian's arrival, and her heart still skipped at the sight of him in his wedding tuxedo. Some things never changed. "The guests are ready," he said, his amber eyes warm with love and anticipation. "Amelia's crying already, and we haven't even started the ceremony. And my mother. Radiant. She's been waiting 20 years to see you this happy." They walked together toward the altar, where a small group of their most beloved people waited. Amelia dabbed her eyes with tissues, Luna beamed with pride, and Sabria glowed with the contentment of a woman who had finally seen justice served. As they exchanged vows overlooking the ocean, Teora thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first day she'd discovered her grandmother's diary to this moment of perfect happiness. Every step had led to this, not just to victory over Silas Hartmore, but to a love that had grown from shared purpose into something unbreakable. "I promise," Caspian said as he slipped the wedding ring onto her finger, "to love you not just as my wife, but as my partner in everything. To stand with you through whatever battles come next, and to remind you every day that you are the strongest, most incredible woman I've ever known." "I promise," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes, "to love you for seeing me not as a victim seeking revenge, but as a warrior worthy of partnership, for helping me become who I was meant to be, and for choosing to build our future together." When they kissed, sealing their marriage and their partnership, the small crowd erupted in celebration, but Teora barely heard them. All that mattered was this moment, this man, this life they were beginning together. Later, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, she caught sight of a television in the corner of the reception tent. The news was showing footage of Silas Hartmore's sentencing hearing, 5 years for fraud, his business empire dissolved, his reputation destroyed forever. Justice served, love triumphant. A new beginning for the daughter who had refused to stay erased. "No regrets?" Caspian asked, following her gaze. "None," she said firmly, turning back to lose herself in his amber eyes. "This is exactly where we're supposed to be." As they swayed together under the stars, surrounded by the people who loved them, Teora Delacroix. Thorne knew that sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so beautiful that their hatred becomes irrelevant. She had won everything that mattered: justice for her mother, love for herself, and a future bright with infinite possibility. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my effort, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to your very own channel. Much love. See you in the next video. God bless you and take care.